Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tax Talk, broadcast by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. My name is Jordan Bateman, and I'm the British Columbia Director of the CTF. And I'm joined, as always, by our Alberta Director, Paige McPherson. Paige, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks. Yeah, how are you doing today, Jordan?
I am doing great. Canadian moment here. Weather check, Paige. How are things there in Calgary, Alberta, Canada?
Not too bad. Warm and windy, which is the best we can hope for in the winter. So I'd say not bad in Calgary.
We are on a day 79 straight of rain here in Vancouver. No, I'm just kidding. It's not quite that bad. There has been a lot of rain lately. Kids are building arcs in order to get to school. It's a bit concerning.
What's crazy is that was believable. We all believed you.
Absolutely. It's nuts here. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us here on Blab for Tax Talk. In a few moments, Paige and I will talk with Caitlyn Madlener and Renaud Brossard, two university students involved with our Generation Screwed Campus Club initiative. Caitlyn is from the University of Calgary. How are you doing, Caitlyn?
Great. How about yourself?
Doing well. I don't have to ask you the weather because I'm presuming, you and Paige have the same weather.
Well, to be fair, it is Calgary, and it could be raining on one side and snowing on the other side. So.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. And I understand the Chinooks, the climate change Chinooks are especially bad this year, Leo DiCaprio tells me. So
particularly terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. And Renaud is from the University of Quebec in Montreal. Renaud, how are you?
Not too bad. How about you?
I'm doing well. What's the weather like there?
Honestly, it's unbelievably warm. There's practically no snow on the ground right now. I think the Chinooks here as well right now.
It's all over.
Come over.
The terror is spreading. Well, lots of ways for all of you listening to connect with us. If you've joined us here live, please make sure to subscribe to our feed to keep track of all our shows. Make sure you give Renaud and Caitlyn lots of props because, they're newbies. And you can comment in our sidebar. You can ask a question by slashing or typing /Q. Don't slash anyone. Type /Q in order to ask a question. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, just so you know, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to three things: lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. That's what frames all the advocacy, communications, and research work we do. You can visit our website at taxpayer.com, see what Paige, myself, and everyone else is working. I believe it's generationscrewed.ca, is that right?
Yep.
.ca, and see what the Generation Screwed team is working on as well. And if you're listening to this later as a podcast or recording, we still want to hear from you. You can check out our website at taxpayer.com or email us at bc.director@taxpayer.com. And you can engage on our Facebook page at facebook.com/taxpayer.com. All right. Hey, Paige, what's new?
Well, what's new here? We've had a visit here in Alberta from the Prime Minister. Great.
So exciting.
With his presence. And he's come because people in Alberta are saying, look, we need a little help. We've been giving a lot, by means of federal transfers to other provinces for a long time. The equalization formula, as we've discussed on one of our previous shows, is set up in such a way that we're still contributing more, and the formula is not going to catch up to us in terms of not having to contribute that much for some time because it's averaged out. So we kind of feel screwed over, I think, a lot of Albertans in terms of the deal that we're getting. So Trudeau came down and said that, he's here to help. He's promised us some help. He's given us some money, some accelerated infrastructure cash, and has said he's going to make some changes to EI, I guess to make it more generous because it can be a little bit trickier to get out here because of the very complicated formula that is EI. Now, it's all interesting and it's all well and good, I guess. But, I think that we have to look at the systemic problem here, which is that, why is Alberta perhaps no longer a great place to come invest? Why is Alberta, lagging when it comes to not just the oil prices? There are government policies that are a part of this as well. So I think that our problems are maybe a little more systemic than just an influx of cash can fix. So I don't think it's going to be, the beacon that we all need. But at least he came and said, hey.
So what you're saying is Justin Trudeau can't buy me love. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. He could try, and he is trying. And I do think, I think Albertans at least are saying, okay, at least you're coming and acknowledging that there are some problems here that need to be fixed. But ultimately, like I said, using infrastructure money as stimulus, hasn't really worked well in the past in terms of recovering an economy. So I don't think that's going to pan out.
Don't you think he had to come though to Alberta though after his boneheaded remarks in Davos? I mean, when Justin Trudeau loses Naheed Nenshi, he's really lost kind of the pillar of the classic Alberta Liberal. So he has to come in.
It's true. And, it's interesting. So a reporter asked him in a scrum, so if the NEB approves why is the name escaping me? The pipeline. Energy East. I'm thinking Northern Gateway. So Energy East. If it's approved, will you give it the okay, stamp it and let's go? And he couldn't really say yes. And that I think was a big flub when it came to, the way that I've seen Albertans react. If it's approved and, we get the environmental go ahead, why would we not just, rubber stamp it and get this thing on the go? The fact that I think he couldn't just give a yes to that probably bothered a lot of people. So, while you're right. I mean, after his remarks, I do think he had to come to Alberta. I'm not sure if he really smoothed things over in that front.
Caitlyn, were the university students of Calgary swooning to think that Justin Trudeau might be breathing the same air as him?
Well, I actually saw him quite a while ago when he came to the university, and there were a lot of students that were swooning over him. There was literally a crowd that followed him at the university.
Were they students or were they reporters? Because sometimes
it was students. It was a bunch of students. There was about 20 of them that just followed him throughout the university. It was very strange.
He has that effect.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what to say anymore about this.
I know. Sad.
Yeah. Although I have noticed a subtle shift in some of the op-ed around him. And I think Michael Dentant had one today on how he could become a bit of a ditherer if he doesn't actually deliver on some of these things that he's saying. And Jen Garrison today in the National Post had a great story on the Alberta thing saying, what was this all about? It was a re-announcement of infrastructure plus about $250 million, which sounds like a lot of money and obviously is, but it's only about $60 per head in Alberta, hardly going to soothe the growing unemployment rate in Alberta. Mm-hmm. Caitlyn, do you have anything new that you want to share?
Well, a couple weeks ago, first day class, I get invited in my class to see Bill Morneau, the federal finance minister, come and speak at the university because he's consulting with students. Of course, the class that he's consulting with is first year political science students, and of course, 400 level class of students, which I find very strange in the first place. But so we decide to go because, well, it's interesting. And so we show up and it's a totally full class and there's a bunch of media there and he's sitting in the crowd, of course, and looking cool. And and so we're just sitting there and, I didn't expect to go up and talk to him or to ask a question or anything. I thought I'd just gauge and see how students, ask questions because you never know. And so as he's asking questions, the student gets up and asks him, well, what is up with equalization? Why are we paying so much into equalization? What's wrong with it? And he's listing a bunch of facts and figures. And then Bill Morneau basically says, well, no one else wants to reevaluate equalization at this point in time, so we shouldn't. We should just ignore it. Alberta will get ahead. They'll be fine. It's okay. And so that annoyed me. And so I went up to the mic and I told him that was an unsatisfactory answer and that it is insulting to Albertans, the fact that you can think that this is okay to have happen and not address it or even acknowledge it or even talk about it. And I went on about how equalization is bad for Alberta and it's always been bad for Alberta. And he didn't exactly like that. So he basically said that, well, no one else is talking about it and Alberta just needs to be quiet. And then I asked him a follow-up question. I asked, well, how do you expect to balance the budget in 4 years without raising taxes? Are you going to cut spending or are you just going to lie and continue going in a deficit? And his answer, I kid you not, was basically, well, the budget will balance itself. He said that we'll just grow the economy. That magically the economy will just grow somehow, and somehow we'll just have a balanced budget. He mentioned nothing about spending reductions or tax increases or what have you. It was all about, well, it'll just happen. And that shocked me. I can't deny it. It shocked me completely. And I had another friend go up and he asked him, well, how can you and the Trudeau government justify going into debt so much and spending so much money to future generations? And he basically didn't answer the question. He said, oh, well, we're investing in infrastructure, which is not an answer to the question at all. And it was extremely frustrating. And, well, the media liked it, and they came up and talked to all of us afterwards, and we got a bunch of interviews, and we're on national news and everything. So
Cool.
I think it was a success.
What's this whole nobody else is talking about equalization? Like, hello?
Brad Wall.
Yeah, exactly.
I look backwards on the screen?
No,
It does
that's
say
fine.
Brad Wall.
That's good. And in fairness, in fairness to Morneau, I brought this up with the provincial government here in British Columbia, and just I don't know if it's too complex or they just don't think that now's the time, but they don't want to go along with Brad Wall and talk about it. So it's odd. It's odd. You think you see an opportunity there to claw back, tens of millions of dollars, and they just don't want to take it.
I know. And I actually think when you're talking oh, sorry, Renaud, what were you going to say?
I'm guessing in a way for BC, it's probably a way for the BC Prime Minister to get more money from the federal government as well with infrastructure spending and all. It's probably easier for him to try and say, hey, Justin, do you want to give me a few billions? Rather than say, let's stop giving a few millions that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I personally, my view is that it's worse for the have-not provinces. I mean, it gives their governments the excuse to be unaccountable, with their use of money. They're basically getting a free check. And it allows for fiscal irresponsibility, obviously, because they've got that cushion there. But also there is that lack of transparency and accountability because it's not as though it's, provincial tax dollars that are going into provincial coffers and being spent. It's sort of this kind of weird from somewhere else pile of cash that they can do whatever they want with. I think if you ask taxpayers, don't want to speak for you, Renaud, but if you ask taxpayers in Quebec or Nova Scotia or PEI, is your government using that money wisely? Are they taking those equalization dollars and doing something good with them? Is it worth it for them? Like for the taxpayers in those provinces, I think by and large you might hear the answer no.
Well, I agree with you. And the sad thing, though, is that there's lots of people who we should be receiving more in equalization. Personally, I don't think so. I don't think it's a good thing at all. Receiving more means that we're a poorer province, and that's not what I want for my region. I don't think that's what anybody should want. And it's true. It is definitely it's fiscal recklessness in a way. They're spending billions of dollars, and people here, just like I believe in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick as well, are clearly not satisfied with the way governments are spending their money. People are clearly not satisfied. They're really cynical about what politicians are doing, but they're not satisfied about the services they're getting. They're not satisfied about their tax bills. They're not satisfied about anything. So just pumping more money into it is not a way to solve the problem.
Very true. Very true. Hey, Renaud, do you have anything new that you want to talk about? Pardon me.
Well, yeah, sure. I don't know if you guys saw there was this Fraser and MEI Institute report that came out yesterday. They ranked the current premiers for all provinces on fiscal responsibility. Funny thing is, for the last few years, and out of the bottom four, the last four premiers are not in office anymore. The sixth one, the most fiscally irresponsible premier left is Caitlyn Madlener, but all the other ones from other provinces, we're talking about Alison Redford, David Alward, Robert Gibbs, and Tom Marshall. They're all gone.
Yeah.
So that gives a bit of hope. At least people are realizing that fiscally responsible.
That's a bit heartening that the taxpayers have said, no thanks, kick you out of office. Yeah, that's true. Kathleen Wynne, though, yeah, that's a doozy. That's a big spending government, not the most fiscally responsible.
Perplexingly, Christy Clark from BC was number one, and Premier Couillard from Quebec was number two. And so I did a couple of interviews on this yesterday, and aren't you being too hard on Premier Clark? I'm like, well, this is pretty low bar to get over, right? It's like saying you're the best Canadian team in the NHL this year. You're still not in the playoffs, but hey, you're the best, right? Like, it means absolutely nothing. So those measures are always interesting, always pretty funny. I know Fraser puts a lot of time and effort into them, but how Kathleen Wynne was not at the absolute bottom is a little bit perplexing to me. For me, my what's new is just a funny little story about the greatest name for a tax ever. So there's a little town between Kelowna and Vernon called Lake Country in British Columbia. Beautiful beaches, a resort, wineries, stuff like that. But they've been hiking property taxes year after year after year. And then this year, their council decided, well, we can't continue to hike property taxes. This isn't right. So we're going to freeze property taxes, which sounds like great news. Here's the problem. They freeze property taxes, but then they announce a brand new tax levy called the Transportation for Tomorrow tax, which might be the most frilly name for a tax we've ever seen in British Columbia. Who could oppose Transportation for Tomorrow and being taxed for that, right? The great thing is this tax is going to generate, $500,000 or something for them, and they're going to use it on, road projects. The problem is, over the past 5 years, they take about almost $2 million more in taxes from their residents than they did 5 years ago because of all their increases. But they've spent about $3 million more in labor costs. So all of that tax increase has gone to pay for labor, union salary, benefits, wages, RCMP contract, things like that. So all the extra taxes those poor people have been paying have not gone to core infrastructure, not gone to water, sewer, parks, Transportation for Tomorrow. And it's so bad that now they have to have this extra levy. So I'm trying to tamp down these guys a little bit and hopefully try to stop this from spreading to other municipalities where they bring in these extra levies and, claim that they're so desperately needed for infrastructure, but it's really just a way to pretend that their property taxes aren't increasing.
Right. So it's Transportation for Tomorrow, and then is it tax? Do they call it a tax?
No, it's a levy. It's a levy page.
So that's something we've been facing here. Well, every government, right? I mean, they never want to call it a tax. It's always a levy or a tool or a revenue measure. They come up with the most creative names.
Yeah, the asset levy, we see this all over the place, the road levy. But yeah, the Transportation for Tomorrow tax. Transportation for Tomorrow is the name of the plan, and they call it a levy, but we'll call it a tax and just torture them for a while.
Mm-hmm, definitely. But I mean, it's, for your average person seeing that Transportation for Tomorrow levy, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. I mean, it sounds like a great use of money.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there's a reason why governments don't want to call it a tax, right? They know that it's not going to be popular when they're probably already taxed enough. So maybe governments should look internally a little bit and say, if there's a reason we don't want to be honest with people and upfront and call it a tax, maybe we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, it's the never-ending battle for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So, All right, well, let's get to the main event here. Generation Screwed is a student-led group of campus clubs dedicated to informing and mobilizing young Canadians who want to save their economic future. Governments continue to rack up massive debt. You can go to debtclock.ca to see what the debt is in your province. And they continue to hand that bill down to future generations. So joining us today are Caitlyn and Renaud. Renaud, they are two of our campus club coordinators. Aaron Gunn, who oversees Generation Screwed on behalf of the CTF, loves these guys, loves their creativity and the stuff they're bringing to the table. We're very excited to have them here. And maybe, Caitlyn, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about why this issue interested you and how you came to be part of Generation Screwed.
Well, I've always been a fiscal conservative for as long as I can remember. I've been involved in politics, and I've been interested in basically fighting back and to be able to have a say in what's going on, because it's necessary at this point in time to go out and to really make a difference and to go out and be loud and be annoying. That's the way I look at it. And honestly, I've just been involved in so long, and I first got involved actually with when Ian Merkley asked me to come on board, who basically started the Generation Screwed initiative. And I went out to Ottawa, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. And then I got into, we got to hear from a bunch of speakers, and I got to meet a bunch of people, a bunch of students all across the country, and it was fantastic. And I felt reinvigorated from the experience because, you know, being alone at a university can sometimes be a little bit daunting. You want to go and tackle these big issues, and you think, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard. How can I do this alone? But then you go to these events, and you go and you meet all these people who are basically the same as you, and you see them all across the country, and you get to know what they're experiencing and the ideas that they come up with, and the different events that they can hold, and how many people they can get at these events, and it's exciting. And so that's kind of how I got involved in it, and I've always been fiscally conservative, and it's just a passionate thing for me. That's about it. Yeah.
Very cool.
I can definitely relate with that. I can feel the same thing on my campus. It seems like an uphill battle. Most campus groups in universities seem to be on the far left, and we're one of the only ones that's saying, look, students are not all on the far left. There's some students that are worried about the country's financial future as well. That's and Generation 2 is one of the best ways I've seen to fight back.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of stuff have you guys done on campus? Start with you, Renaud.
Sorry,
what kind of stuff have you guys done on campus? Have you done any events that are particularly successful?
We have, honestly. There's one of our most successful ones, and I know Caitlyn hosted one as well. It was the Action Forum. We did 2 over the course of the last year. We're planning a 3rd one very, very soon as well, actually, in Quebec City. And the first one, Montreal, we got about 120 people to come. It was amazing. There was quite a good turnout. In Calgary, Caitlyn and the people over there did an amazing job. It was 150 people, something like this. And I've seen pictures. It looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
For Quebec City, well, we're hoping to beat that and do about 175 people at least. So
that's amazing for a student-led event, really. I mean, I was pretty involved on campus, and it's often hard to get 10 people out. That's very successful by campus standards. So getting 175 people or 150 people really shows, your hard work. What about you, Caitlyn? Have you done anything? I know the Action Forum was successful. Any other events that you've held on campus that have been successful?
Yeah, we've had the debt clock come to the campus, so we had it come and we were showing it to everyone. We had people come up, we got them to sign petitions, we handed out information. We've had Derek Fildebrandt come when he was the Alberta director. That was a really big event. We had about 30 people attend that one, and it was right in the middle of Alison Redford and everything that was going on, so it was a pretty big event, and we've had a lot of other successful events as well.
Yeah, that's great. So when you guys are on campus, I know you're talking about the federal debt and provincial debt in your respective provinces. What about with your student union or other things, other organizations on campus that are taking student money? Do you ever, do you have any concerns about that?
Well, I know I do have concerns. The problem is I can't actually fulfill those concerns. I know I've heard things. You always hear whispers from the Students' Union and from people that work there that things are being mismanaged. But the Students' Union at the University of Calgary is very, very private about the money that they spend. You can request the audited financial statements from the Students' Union, but the problem with that is they're extremely vague and they say almost nothing. So, there'll be, and it's also the University of Calgary Students' Union is by far the largest money-wise in Canada. And I don't know where that money goes, to be frank with you, but I'd love to find out. And so, hopefully we'll be able to get someone actually in the Students' Union to really understand what's going on there and where the money's going and what's happening, because honestly I just don't know, and I've tried the best that I can to figure it out, but I don't know.
Renaud, you're back. If you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I seem to be sorry. I can hear about half the words you're saying, but sure.
Okay, so Renaud has said that there's definitely a link between his pro-big spending student government and his connection problems, which is probably true. So Renaud, what's big spending about your student government? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, it's at my school. There's we don't have one student union. We'd rather have 6 large ones. that regroup a few different programs.
Okay.
Luckily, as I'm studying management, so at least people in management don't really like strikes, so that's better.
Yeah.
But most of the other student unions are pro-strike for practically anything. Last year, for example, I know the 2012 strikes, if you heard about them, but there were quite a few riots, actually. It was more than just a strike. But last year, the student unions decided to, what was it again? They decided to go on strike over austerity and petroleum. Not against or in favor. They're just, actually, they're against petroleum, not Energy East, not one certain project, just petroleum itself. So yeah, that was kind of weird. But the sad thing is that they're always going on about how democratic student unions are and how direct democracy is the only way, while management students have constantly voted against strikes. The other student unions decided that they would block us from going to our classes as well. And actually, last year, they decided at some point that they would occupy one of the university's building. Guess which one? The management building as well. So they actually wrecked the whole place. There was about $250,000 worth of damages, and that was a complaint about cuts to the university. Personally, I don't see how having to spend $250,000 to repair a building is going to help the university's budget. But hey, who knows?
Yeah, you live in a particularly interesting part of the country when it comes to government. If you're making national news for huge riots, it's so weird too. I mean, the whole thing, I remember watching it on, advocate, we need free tuition and free this and that and whatever. I'm like, you're not even in class. Like, none of you are in class. You want free tuition for this degree that you're getting, and you've spent like 3 weeks out of class rioting in the streets. Like, if this is something valuable to you, go to class. And I mean, obviously, in Canada, tuition is heavily subsidized. So, but that fact seems lost often. So yeah, you definitely have an uphill battle.
Yeah, I imagine, Caitlyn, that with a lot of students, when you say the word debt, they immediately reflex to student loans. There's the generation squeezed people who drive me a little bit crazy because everything is the baby boomers' fault.
Yeah.
And I'm not a baby boomer, and certainly I understand the pains of having to deal with older generations. But maybe talk a little bit about how you work around that issue when you talk to individual students, because people are generally selfish, and so they kind of put their first thought first, which is, hey, forgive my debt, and what do I care if society has to pay more?
Well, the best way to look at it is what you're saying when it's just a personal thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you make the reference to, well, you're having to go through all this debt. Would you like to be going through that debt as a country as well? I mean, it makes sense, and people can really understand it when you put it into specific terms for themselves. It's like, the best example is when you actually break the number down in just a smaller number. So you make it so it's that you get so much money every month, and then you have to, but you're spending X amount of money. That's 20 times that amount. Is that okay? Do you think that's an okay thing to do? And most people will say no, because they know, well, you're going to be going into debt, and that's not okay, and you're going to have to pay that off later. And so when you make that sort of analogy, then people understand it easier, and it really hits home with them. And I think that once you start doing that more often, students make it the connection easier, especially when we had the debt clock out. I mean, the number's literally right there standing in front of you. It's kind of hard to ignore, and it's broken down by person too. So to see it that way, and you as a student, to see the number that you're owed $18,000 per person, that's a lot of money that I don't have. So it's kind of frustrating to see, but it really helps to break it down for them.
Yeah. And then what do you do when politicians say, oh, well, guys, look, this is good borrowing. Sure, we'll have to pay it off over 50 or 25 or 30 years or whatever, but we're going to have this fancy new building or this great hospital or this wonderful new light rail line. How do you, what would you like to kind of say back to those politicians who give you that line?
Well, I say, I'm going to have to be paying for it in the future. You're spending right now, and this money is going to something that is maybe needed, maybe not, who knows. But I'm going to have to be paying for it in the future. The money doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's not from thin air. It's coming from us, and it's going to be coming from us whether we want it to or not. And that's all I have to say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when it comes to, advocating, for these things and saying, okay, well, we should just spend on it now and it's for your own benefit, it compromises future programs for you guys, right? I mean, it compromises things like subsidized tuition and healthcare and education beyond post-secondary. Those are the kinds of things that, are a little bit compromised when you're looking at huge debt loads in future, because like you said, the money has to come from somewhere. Renaud, what do you say generally when you have to counter that kind of rhetoric?
Well, usually what I'll say is, sure, that sounds like an amazing project. And is there anywhere else that we can cut? I mean, there's so many government programs that are not necessarily useful. And there's definitely some economies that can be made there. Those economies can serve to finance to finance the time that infrastructure spending is actually good. And there's also those times where it's simply and totally ludicrous, where it's just, well, do we really need to have a whole LED display on a water pump like you guys have in Calgary?
The poop palace. Yes, we need it. We need it. I need to know when more sewage is flowing through pumps, and I need it displayed in a light show. I need that. But yeah, it's a good point that you make. So what about backlash? I mean, I was an activist on campus when I was in university. It's not easy all the time. Do you guys ever face any backlash? What are the big challenges that you face?
Honestly, the challenges that we face for the most part are getting students out and getting students involved. I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of students are busy and maybe they're working multiple jobs to pay for things. And it's just frustrating and hard to get people to come out and to really get these issues to drive home. But, if you have a good topic and if you have a lot of people that on campus and you talk to all these different organizations, you can get these people out and you can get them involved. And I think it's exciting. And, once you start to know a group of people at the university, it grows and it grows and it grows. And you guys can talk about all sorts of things and come up with different plans to go against things. Like at the University of Calgary, for example, they renewed and they redid the president's office at the university. And it was this extravagant thing where they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on it. And they had a $250,000 staircase that they built inside of it, which was absurd. And students didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it. And I think it was the Calgary Herald that broke the report on it. And so we thought, well, this is ridiculous. So I got a bunch of students together and we started a petition against it. And we got, I think it was from a couple days of just wandering around the university, getting people to sign. I believe we got over 300 signatures of all students. And from that, we actually got a meeting with the president of the university, which didn't really lead anywhere because, they already decided that they were going to do it. But we made our voices known. And the thing that frustrated me the most about that was the president of the students' union was not arguing against the president of the university. They were like, oh, well, you guys can spend that money. That's okay. But then there's me and my friends there sitting there who were like, we've been talking to the students. This is what they say. This is absurd. How could you be doing this? And, stuff like that. It's just very frustrating. But most students, when you talk to them and they see something like that, are against it. And we didn't suffer that much opposition when it came to something like that. The opposition came from the students' union, from the president. So...
Wow, that's interesting. You're fighting the man. I didn't know about that staircase. That's outrageous.
Yeah, no, it's absurd. And it's like, it's this, I don't know, it's made out of like some sort of a white concrete and there's LED lights that are flashing from above on it and everything like
Always
that.
with the LED lights.
I know.
They seem expensive.
They're not expensive though. That's the thing.
Poop palace, the $250,000 staircase. Apparently the going rate for LED lights is $250,000.
Jeez. Hey, any talk on campus about the U.S. presidential stuff? I mean, it's dominating, obviously, the American media, but anyone talking about it on campus?
I don't think people are talking about it that much. Well, I mean, the only thing people are talking about here is the fact that Ted Cruz is there, and he's born in Calgary, which is very exciting for us. But honestly, I don't hear much about it on campus. I think that I hear more now about what's happening provincially than I do about stuff that's happening in the United States, which is exciting and good because, we need to talk about it right now. And it's we're in a critical point in time and we need to get people motivated.
Yeah, that actually is great.
No one's feeling the burn in Calgary, I guess. Hey, Renaud, what about you? Any talk on campus about the U.S. presidential stuff?
Not much. I mean, there's a few Bernie Sanders fans, and those guys are very vocal. A few people talk about Trump as well. After all, he's a phenomenon. Whether people are for him or against him, he's definitely out there. But no, it's true. People mostly talk about what's happening provincially or federally. I know in province, lots of people are opposed right now to what they call austerity, which is just a reduction in the growth of spending. That's anyway. But yeah, there's that, and of course, new Trudeau government.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, it sounds like students are more or less engaged, know what's going on, but I mean, I know that apathy is always the problem. Apathy is always what you need to fight on campus. But I think that, Generation Screwed has been extremely successful. So can either of you speak to, as a national movement, the sort of gains that have been made by the Generation Screwed campaign?
Sure. Well, nationally, I think we really have raised a lot of awareness on the debt and deficits issue. I can tell that in my region anyway, debt and deficits were not very well understood issues. Lots of people went out to protest so-called austerity measures, and they said, well, the debt's under control. Sure. Well, the issue here is not whether the debt's under control or not. The issue is the fact that every single year, 11% of our budget goes to pay for debt servicing. Now, if you want to have more services, fine. Or if you want to reduce taxes, fine. Those are the laudable goals. But I don't think anyone has as an objective to pay 10 or 11% of its budget just to service the debt. There's no net gain for anyone. And by approaching this issue, by talking about this issue, we're getting more and more people to realize that while spending might be fun, there's a revenue part to which we need to look as well, and we need to balance these two parts.
Interesting. Yeah, paying down on the credit card. I agree. I mean, and that's the same thing as, they say, oh, well, it's for your own good, all this infrastructure spending for stimulus purposes down the road. And you're just compromising future services. I mean, that money, that 10 or 11%, that could be spent. I mean, yes, it could be allocated to tax reductions, but it could also be spent on programs, right? I mean, you could probably put a good chunk on tuition, for example, with that money. So yeah, exactly. It's good that you guys are putting it in perspective. So Generation Screwed is it 26 campus clubs across the country? I believe it's 26.
I believe so, yeah. And
so that's pretty huge. I mean, in terms of student movements in Canada, that's pretty big compared to a lot of the other ones that are active and I think are much smaller.
It's true, and as a matter of fact, I have a small correction because today we just confirmed a new coordinator as well at Université Laval in Quebec City.
27.
Now we're 27. Awesome. We're still
that's really great. I mean, there has to be enough students that care about these issues, that care about being saddled with debt in the future, to have 27 campus clubs. I mean, really, when you're talking about university and how and apathy, as you were talking about, Caitlyn, I mean that really is a pretty big achievement, I think. So that's great to see.
Well, folks, if you want to support Generation Screwed, go to generationscrewed.ca. You can also go to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation website, taxpayer.com. If you're out there and you've got some money and you want to support these guys and the work they're doing, feel free to make a donation. You can designate it to our student program. We actually fly campus club coordinators into various events where we can, expose them to some of the best thinkers in the movement, some of the people who are out there commenting on fiscal policy. It's been an incredible thing, and something that at the CTF we're talking about how what's the next step for this in the future. I'm headed into a budget lockup this week, and I'm hoping it's my last budget lockup alone in BC, and that next year we can have a Generation Screwed person there as well to comment on the debt issues from a student's perspective. So lots of places to grow, lots of places to kind of now that we've got this great core group, kind of spread the tentacles into public policy and start to see if we can push some buttons and really get some changes made. So guys, you're doing a great job, and we thank you for it.
Agreed.
Paige, you got a waste of the week.
I do have a waste of the week. So, when most people travel for business and you've got to travel for, let's say, one city to another city, and it takes you about an hour and a half to get there. Normally what you would do, what I do is, you take your personal car, you get a rental car, or maybe you even take the bus if you've got time on your side, right? And if you're carpooling with your coworkers and you need to discuss things, then a rental car or somebody's personal car is a great option, because obviously, you can chew gum and walk at the same time. You can drive and talk at the same time as well. Well, we found because of the expense disclosure website for the Alberta government, which puts government employee and professionals' expenses online, we discovered something that was quite outstanding. And that was that one chair of an Alberta Health Review panel has been taking town cars quite liberally. In fact, she spent almost $27,000 taking town cars in just 1 year between 2014 and 2015. And these were short trips. So for people in Alberta, she's going from Calgary to Canmore, Calgary to Lethbridge, Calgary to Medicine Hat, not really far distances. I think the minimum is maybe an hour and 15 minutes, the maximum being 2 hours and 45 minutes for these journeys. You're not talking about an expedition across the world. You're definitely talking about something that's drivable. And of course, there's buses and shuttles that go to these locations as well. So she and her panel members taking these town cars, and some of these trips, 13 out of 27 of them, cost actually over $1,000 a pop, just for a town car trip for a day. A lot of these days are short days. They go there, they're there for maybe 2 hours, and then they go back. It's not as though, you're too weary to drive or anything like that. Quite excessive. So we brought this to the attention of Alberta Health. I got in touch with their spokesperson and just said, hey, this is really outstanding. What's up here? And actually, it was a great result. They said, okay, these are valid questions. They looked into it. They said, well, they're long trips. They could be really long days, 12 hours. Sometimes they don't want to drive for 2.5 hours, at the end of the day. And I looked into it and said, well, some of them are maybe, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. They're really not very long trips. Doesn't really add up. And then they got back to us again and said, you know what, we agree. They said, well, these are fair questions, and we've directed our program staff who support these professionals to ask them to use rental vehicles when there's someone comfortable driving with passengers. So really, that's a pretty excellent result. They've taken this, they've said, okay, look, yeah, these do seem a little bit unreasonable, and now we're going to direct our staff to try and have some cost saving measures where they can. So from my perspective, pretty much the best result we could have had. It's great. They've got a directive now to save some money for taxpayers. And really, at the end of the day, it's all because of online expense disclosure, this is exactly why it's so important for governments to post their expenses online. We don't have that for all of our government agencies in Alberta, but we do have that for a great number of employees. And we would have never found this. You wouldn't have known to put a freedom of information request in on this person who, runs a panel. You really just see it pop up online. And we actually have it on Twitter as well. If anybody's interested here in Alberta, twitter.com, it's called Alberta Expenses, so /Alberta Expenses, or you can search that on Twitter in the search function. And we actually will auto-tweet. We sponsor an account that auto-tweets these expenses out. So people can see them and say, this seems a little fishy. They get a direct link to the receipt. But that kind of transparency is so important to discover these things. And sometimes, I think, as this shows, government can be pretty reasonable and say, yeah, maybe there is some cost savings we can find here. Thanks for pointing it out. So I think it's a waste of the week, but it has a little bit of a happy ending.
Oh, that's good news. And $1,000 for a 2-hour trip, you could charter a helicopter for that and get there even faster. So, but you're absolutely right. And I got to take a look at your Alberta expenses thing and see how that's built, because I wonder if there's something we could do in other parts of the country to auto tweet the same kind of stuff. So.
Absolutely. If you've got the expenses posted online, you can set up a Twitter account that auto tweets it. I don't personally know how to do it, but there are definitely people who know how to do it. And it's really handy because a lot of our supporters or followers in Alberta will go and check out this account and they'll call it out themselves, right? They can say, okay, this seems a little fishy, and they alert me to it oftentimes. So it's a great way to also just get people involved in the process.
Crowdsourcing watchdogging. It's the future, folks.
Exactly.
Well, everyone, that's it for this episode of Tax Talk from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Be sure to follow Paige on Twitter at Paige McP, Renaud at Renaud Brossard, Caitlyn at Little Red YYC. She's got the coolest handle of all of us. And I'm at Jordan Bateman. If you're watching this on Blab, be sure to subscribe to our feed and give us props. We're very needy people, so give us the props. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please subscribe and give us a good rating. I'm pleased to report that we are the number 22 podcast this week in the government and organizations section. We are one behind PETA and one ahead of the French version of Archives Canada's Great Moments in Canadian History feed. So there you go. Tough competition, boy.
So watch. Help us overcome PETA.
Yes, help us defeat PETA. Yes, we need more. Actually, we could get some of the PETA people if Paige would put her dog on screen every once in a while for us. You can check out our website at taxpayer.com and be sure to join us again next week, Friday, February 12th, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. I think Paige and I might give out some taxpayer valentines to politicians and governments who are doing a good job managing taxpayer resources. We'll rope in one of our other directors to help us find those people. We talk a lot about the bad stuff that goes on in government, but like Paige pointed out, when governments act and change policy and save us money, we should also report them. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, guys, for all your work you're doing with Generation Screwed, and we'll talk to all of you next week. Thanks.
Thanks.